Opened our marriage. Now my husband's girlfriend wants him to father her child, and he's left the decision to me. My husband and I have been together since we were 22. Now, at 38, with 2 wonderful sons, a teenager and a preteen, I look at our life and marvel at how far we've come. When our youngest was just 3, I felt this urge to explore, to push boundaries. I asked if we could open our marriage. We dipped our toes into swapping a few times. It was interesting, but deep down, what I really discovered was how much I enjoyed being with women. After that, I realized I was ready to stop exploring, but I told my husband he was free to continue if he wished. We spoke at length, laying down boundaries and ground rules. Ultimately, he agreed. I barely dated anyone else, just had a few brief dalliances with women, nothing ever lasted. Then he met Sarah. She's 40, radiantly confident, with a wildly successful career. The spark between them was immediate, and she quickly expressed interest in meeting me. I was adamant, their relationship could not interfere with our family, with his role as a devoted dad and proactive partner in our household. As long as my family life remained untouched, I was at peace with what they shared. Once a month, they'd head off for a weekend together, relishing their connection. Occasionally, they'd whisk away on many trips. Oddly enough, I found myself genuinely happy watching him so fulfilled. Sarah would even send me the occasional video, making it clear she had no designs on usurping my place in his world. On Saturday, Sarah's text caught us off guard. She wanted to see both of us at a restaurant. We arrived, blissfully unaware of what was to come. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She wanted my husband to have a baby with her. She described it as being a single mother by choice, except our arrangement allowed the baby to know its father, with my husband visiting and being part of the child's life. My husband was quick to turn all decisions over to me. He told me, with earnest eyes, that this was 100% my call. If it made me uncomfortable, it wouldn't happen. Both he and Sarah assured me their relationship would continue whatever my answer, so I shouldn't feel as though the fate of their romance rested on my decision. After all, Sarah could always find another donor. But my mind has been in constant turmoil ever since. If I say no, am I crushing my husband's happiness? If I say yes, am I risking my children's future? My marriage? I hate myself for even thinking this, but the thought that maybe Sarah could give him the one thing I hadn't, a daughter, gnaws at me. Would that make her the woman who finally gave my husband a little girl? I am a mess, utterly torn. I need advice. I know deep down that my husband's first priority should always be us, me and our children. I don't think I could bear him having another child outside our family, not when it could so easily distract him from us, from his responsibilities. So why can't I just say no? Of having a baby with him. I read the message, my heart pounding, and I finally asked him, "So, what exactly is your decision?" He looked at me, almost matter of fact, and told me he has decided that he will have a baby with her. He says he'll figure out some routine to make sure everything works out the same for all of us. I felt this wave of disbelief. This is where my marriage had gone? I told him, if that's your decision, then I'm filing for divorce. He just stared at me, confused or maybe irritated, and fired back, "Why? What are you trying to achieve? You leave, and then you see the kids only 50% of the time. We'll both end up spending a fortune on legal fees. You'll go from this nice house with your kids to a small apartment near work. For what? You can already see other people. What does divorce give you? What's in it for you?" He tried so hard to frame it as the most logical, practical thing in the world that the baby will happen, divorce or not, and that he would never stop fulfilling his responsibilities toward our kids or me. He argued that the only sensible thing was to tell our kids about Sarah if and when she gets pregnant and explain to them that they'd soon have a half-sibling. He wants to come clean to everyone and just continue with our lives as if this was the most sensible course forward. I got overwhelmed, the tears just wouldn't stop, and I told him, I don't want her in my life. He quickly responded that she wouldn't be a part of my life. He insisted he'd arrange things so he would do visitations with Sarah and the new baby at her place instead of bringing the baby to our house. In his mind, this would mean everything stays open and honest, the kids would know the truth, and they could even meet their soon-to-be half-sibling without it being weird for anyone. He kept stressing over and over that there is literally zero benefit to divorcing, since our marriage is already open, except it would just drain our bank accounts and disrupt the kids' routines. I can barely breathe through the confusion and panic. I'm so emotional. My head is spinning. I'm planning to speak to a lawyer. I need to hear from someone with a clear head and experience. I'm just trying to figure out what is best for me and my kids. The worst part? He wants to introduce Sarah, if she gets pregnant, as his friend and simply tell everyone that he and his friend are having a baby. This is my life right now. Update 3. I met with a lawyer. I sat in a glass-walled conference room with a yellow pad in hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and a woman with the calmest voice explained my life to me in crisp, unhurried sentences. She did not care that our marriage was open. She did not blink at the word girlfriend. She talked about dates of separation, marital assets, child support belonging to the child and not to any contract between adults. She told me that if my husband fathers a baby, any financial obligation lies alongside ours. She told me to set a line in the sand with money and with a calendar. I left with a folder and a firm day circled in blue ink. I went home and moved my paycheck. I told him I was opening a separate account and that our household bills would be covered from the joint until we figured out a schedule. I said the guest room is now his. He stood in our kitchen, barefoot, holding a coffee cup like it was an anchor, and he asked me if I was really doing this. I said I already had. He asked what he was supposed to tell the kids when they noticed his closet was half empty. I said he'd figure it out since he seemed to have a routine for everything. An hour later, our older son noticed anyway. He didn't overhear a thing, he just walked down the hall, saw the suitcase by the door and his father's running shoes on top, turned around, and looked at me like the floor had opened under him. "Is Dad moving out?" he asked, so flat I barely recognized his voice. I told him that Dad and I were taking space and that it wasn't about him. He stared at me, then at his father, and said, "You said we always finish what we started." My husband tried to explain he actually started to explain logistics to our 15-year-old and our son put his hands up and said, "Please don't do the thing where you make a mess sound reasonable." He packed a backpack. He took his little brother by the hand. They went to my mother's around the corner. He texted me from the porch, "We're safe. Love you." His mother called next. I have never heard her use that tone with her son. I didn't say a word, I just listened to him say, "Mom, that's not fair," like he was 16 again. She must have said the magic words because he put his head on the table after and didn't touch his coffee until it went cold. I asked to meet Sarah alone, somewhere neutral. She suggested a hotel lobby near her office, light wood and too many plants. She looked exactly like herself, elegant, together, like nothing in her world ever spills. She said she didn't want to be my enemy. She said she wants to be a single mother in a legal sense, that she had already retained a reproductive attorney, that there were documents she hoped I'd review and not to give up anything. She insisted, but to make expectations transparent. She slid a sleek folder across the low table with words I didn't know existed in combinations: directed donor, intended non-parent, acknowledgement of paternity if applicable. She kept her voice warm. She said she had a transfer date penciled in for mid-May now, or she could pivot to an EUE with a bank donor this cycle. She said she'd hoped to give him a window, a last chance to decide whether he was there in spirit as well as biology. Then, almost offhand, she mentioned the name they had joked about for a girl, and I saw red spots at the edges of my vision. I asked her how many nursery paint swatches you pick with the man you promised not to destabilize. She blinked, just once. "We were excited," she said, and then, "I'm trying to do this kindly." I told her I wasn't signing anything. I told her my children heard their father negotiating them in real time. I told her to consider that before she printed an acknowledgement of anything. I filed the separation paperwork the next morning. I handed him a copy. He looked smaller reading it, and then strangely relieved. He moved his things to the guest room without arguing. He made dinner that night like his hands needed something automatic to do. At 9, my phone lit up with her name. She sent a screenshot of an appointment confirmation with the fertility clinic header, bold and professional. Friday, 9 m. EUE. Her message under it: "I'm moving forward. If he chooses not to be involved, I respect that. If he shows up, I will accept his presence. I won't hide anything. This is the cleanest version of a messy thing." He saw my face fall and asked if it was the kids. I handed him the phone. He read, swallowed, and sat on the edge of the couch like he was afraid to bend the wrong way and crack. "I told her I'd go," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. "I'll sit in the lobby if that's what it takes. I thought I could be there without breaking us." I told him the truth I should have said on day one: "You can't be in 2 delivery rooms at once." He nodded like he finally heard it. Then he got up, went to the guest room, and came back with a printout he'd stuffed in a book. A consult scheduled for a vasectomy. Tomorrow afternoon. He put it on the table between us like an apology and a dare. "I made this after your ultimatum," he said. "I cancelled it yesterday morning. I rebooked it this afternoon." I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything. I picked up the piece of paper and set it back down where he'd left it. A few minutes later, another text from her. No screenshot. Just words. "If he's not at the clinic on Friday, I'll use a donor. I want this baby. I am sorry for your pain. Update 4. He went to the vasectomy consult and came home slow, like he'd forgotten how knees work. There was a white pharmacy bag looped around his fingers and a square of frozen peas sweating through a dish towel on the counter. He didn't touch either. He stood there and said, "They had a cancellation. I can do it tomorrow at noon." Then, almost in the same breath, "Her EUE is at 9. He said it like a math problem, 3 hours between two different futures. At dinner he kept glancing at the boys like he was memorizing them. Our younger one asked for more rice and he answered, "Of course, buddy," and his voice cracked on the one word that should have been the easiest. After, he took our teenager to practice and they were gone longer than a practice ever is. Back in the driveway, under the orange streetlight glow, I saw our son talking and my husband listening like it hurt. Later, in the hallway, our son brushed past me and said he's going to do the thing that doesn't make new problems. Then he shut his door and put his headphones on and left me with a sentence that felt like a bandage and a warning. At 11, I heard the printer wake up down the hall. He came into the living room with a single page in his hand, folded twice like a letter from high school. He laid it on the coffee table, did a look at me, and called her. He put the phone on speaker, not for me, I could tell, but so he couldn't make it softer in his own head. "I'm not coming on Friday," he told her. "I won't be your donor. I'm having the procedure." She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She said, "Thank you for saying it out loud," and then, "I'll be fine," and then the smallest pause, "Goodbye." He hung up and stared at the folded paper like it might rewrite itself. It was signed consent and post-op instructions. He pushed it toward me and said, "Will you drive me home?" Friday morning, I watched him lace his shoes in the kitchen and then take them off again. He checked the time. He didn't call her. He just stood with his hand flat on the counter like he had to hold the house steady. At 8:40 a.m. he left with the car anyway. He didn't go to the clinic. He parked in a deck across the street from it and texted me a picture of the entrance, glass doors and a ficus. "I'm downstairs," he wrote. "I'm not going up." 10 minutes later my phone buzzed with a photo from her, a hospital bracelet on a wrist I recognized from champagne flutes in better months, a cup of ginger ale, the corner of a beige waiting room chair. "All set," she wrote. "Using a donor. I wish you peace." I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at that sentence until the words stopped being words. At noon I signed my name on the line they leave for a responsible adult and fetched him from a back door that smelled like antiseptic and paper. He was pale and furious with himself and grateful in a way that didn't know where to go. In the car he said, "It's done," and then he didn't say anything else for 6 lights. We stopped for ice, not peas because I couldn't stand the sight of peas anymore, and he laughed once, a dry broken thing, at the ridiculousness of buying a family-sized bag of frozen blueberries for triage. He spent the afternoon on the couch with the blueberries and a tea towel and the TV on mute, watching people mouth words that didn't reach us. Our younger son came home from school and stood at the edge of the rug like it was a border. "Are you sick?" he asked. "A little," his dad said. The kid nodded, disappeared into his room, came back with the ugliest blanket we own, a knit thing my aunt made in the 90s, neon squares and holes you can poke a finger through, and draped it over him with the solemnity of a ceremony. Our teenager didn't come out for a while. When he did, he sat on the floor beside the couch, not quite close enough to touch, and said, "Good," to the air. No one in the room asked what he meant. At 6, his mother let herself in with her own copy of our key like she has always done. She put soup on the stove without asking. She kissed the top of his head the way she did when he split his chin on the trampoline in 4th grade and told him she loved him and then told him again, as if she were making sure his ears worked. She looked at me and said, "I can take the boys tomorrow. You sleep," and it didn't feel like rescue or intrusion, it felt like a hand under my elbow to keep me from slipping. At 9, Sarah texted me, not him. "It's done," she wrote. "Donor sperm. I am ending the relationship. Please don't worry about future contact." There was no attachment this time. No document. Just the flatness of a boundary. I typed and erased and typed and erased and finally put the phone face down and went to run the dishwasher because plates and forks were the only things that made sense. This morning, he moved his suitcase to the foyer without me asking. He stood there with a duffel bag slung across his chest like a sash and said, "The separation stands." "I know that." I nodded. He asked about a schedule and I told him the one my lawyer suggested and he said, "Okay," like a man being assigned a row to hoe. He said he'd found a short-term place 3 blocks away, someone's corporate sublet with 2 white towels and a couch that looks like a waiting room. He said he'd put his new key on a lanyard so he wouldn't mix it with ours. Tiny, careful things that mean everything and nothing. On my way out to the trash, I found the folder she'd given me wedged behind the cookbooks where I must have shoved it the night everything tilted. I took it outside and sat on the steps and read the phrases again: directed donor, acknowledgement, intended, and then I fed one page at a time to the metal mouth of our little charcoal grill. The edges curled and went soft. Ash listed and skittered across the patio like dark snow. When I came back in, the whole house smelled like clean smoke and something ending. At noon, a delivery driver rang the bell and handed me a florist's box with no return address. Inside, lilies so white they looked sharp. The card said nothing, but his handwriting was all over the envelope. I put the flowers on the porch table and let them watch the street. The boys are with my mother tonight. He is in the guest room pretending to sleep. I am at the kitchen table with a Ziploc of insurance cards and a cool rectangle of his post-op instructions under my palm, listening to the fridge hum and the clock tick and a new quiet settle in that is not peace, not yet, but not panic either. Somewhere across town, in a room with blinds that never open all the way, a woman I have had to learn like a new language is drinking ginger tea and counting days. Somewhere closer, my husband, my separated husband, my children's dad, has a purple bruise where certain he is supposed to be in a couch that smells like blueberries. Update 5. We told the boys on Sunday because there are no good days and Sundays at least at pancakes. He stood on the other side of the island like a man pitching a product and I put my palm flat on the counter because it's the only way I don't float away. Our teenager watched our mouths like a court reporter. Our younger traced the knot in the wood with a thumbnail and asked, "Is this forever?" And I said, "It's for now." And then, because he's not a man and deserves a softness we didn't have, "We're still your parents in every room." Our teenager said, very carefully, "So this is the new plan?" And when his dad nodded, he said, "Okay. Then don't move the goalposts." He didn't cry. After, he went to the garage and shot baskets at the door because rain makes backyards theoretical. Thunk. Thunk. Reliable noises. Our younger went to his room and started packing and unpacking the same 3 shirts into a backpack like it was a magic trick that might fix something if he got it right. He moved into the sublet that afternoon. 3 blocks away but a different plant. I drove the ugly knit blanket over because our younger said, with a seriousness bigger than him, that dad needed it more now. The building smelled like lemons that had given up. A woman was walking a dog in a sweater and the elevator said going up with a cheerful lie. Inside, everything was white and square and provisional. There were 4 forks in a drawer and a couch pretending to be furniture. He had put a photo of the boys on the windowsill like a lighthouse for a room with no sea. On the fridge was a magnet that said hello, sunshine, holding up a sheet with instructions for a post-vasectomy analysis, check boxes like a scavenger hunt no one wants to do, abstain, sample, deliver within 1 hour. He saw me look and said, "They gave me a cup that says biohazard on it like the word father isn't already enough." I put the blanket on the back of the couch. It didn't make the place any prettier. It made it less alone. He texted me, on Tuesday from a parking lot I recognized but a crooked lamppost. "I'm 20 minutes from the lab and the cap is stuck," he wrote. Then, this is both comic and a lesson. A minute later, fixed. Heading in. An hour after that, nothing. Then, dropped off. They told me it takes 2 clears. He didn't send a smiley face. We're past that. At school the next day, our younger fainted during an assembly about water conservation. 1 second he was upright and the next a thin line of him was folding paper in a breeze. The nurse called and said his name and then, "He's okay," before the floor could tilt under me. By the time I got there, my separated husband was already sitting on a tiny vinyl chair with his knees up around his ears, our kid leaning into his side like a comma that needed a sentence. There was an open packet of saltines on the counter and a fish in a tank that might as well have been a metronome. He and I took turns holding the paper cup. I said, "Dehydration?" The nurse said, "And probably. All of it." In the car, the kid asked, "If I take little breaths can time go slower?" And both of us answered no, at the same moment and then neither of us spoke again until we were home and the hallway felt smaller because of what didn't happen. I called a therapist. A woman 2 towns over with plants that still looked alive and a way of listening that didn't feel like waiting their turn to talk. We sat in a circle that wasn't quite a circle, grown-ups in chairs and the boys on the floor with a basket of smooth stones like river mistakes. Our teenager picked the darkest one and rolled it in his palm and said, "I need you to stop telling me it's fine when it looks like this," to his dad. Our younger stacked 4 stones, and watched them wobble and said, without looking up, "I'm mad at both of you but not as much as yesterday." The therapist didn't move her eyebrows or pet a click. She asked our names and then asked what helped last week when something felt hard. The boys answer. We didn't. That night he knocked on our door like a visitor. He asked if he could come in to talk about summer schedules in soccer and who would do what on Thursdays. He took his shoes off without being asked and held a clipboard like it was armor. We sounded like two HR reps dividing headcount. When he left, he stood on the porch and said, "I keep thinking there's a right word that will make this not be itself." I said, "There isn't," and he said, "I know," and the air between us hung with 1,000 sentences. At midnight, my phone lit with a number I didn't have to look up. The message was 6 words and 2 dots that could it, Ben Eyes. I'm pregnant. Donor. No contact going forward. I stared at the period at the end like it might be a door. I waited a good minute because my hands know better than my brain. Then I typed, "I hope you have what you need." She wrote back, "I built the scaffolding." I didn't answer. I set the phone face down and listened for my own heartbeat like it might have an opinion. Thursday, our teenager's English teacher sent an email about a poem he'd turned in. Attached was a photo of a page with lines like fences and one sentence underlined twice, "A house is a body that can grow a bruise." I wanted to crawl through the screen and press my forehead to his paper and apologize to the ink. I didn't show it to his dad. Not because he didn't deserve to know, but because I wanted one thing to stay soft for one day. He came over on Friday to take the boys to practice and the doorbell made the cat disappear under the couch. He still has our key but knocks anyway now. On the way out, our younger grabbed the vase of lilies from the porch, which had opened bait and showy like they were auditioning for opera, and said, "Can we leave these at Dad's? They smell like church." He looked at me and I nodded and he carried them like a crown. When I dropped the boys off later, the lilies were on top of the refrigerator under the Hello Sunshine magnet, the stamens dusting the white surface with the same orange that ends up on your fingers when you touch something you shouldn't. Saturday morning, I ran into Sarah outside the co-op. Not a scene, not a movie, just 2 women in the wild aisle of real life. She was in line behind me with ginger tea and crackers, hair in a knot that wasn't trying for anything. She saw me and her mouth did a thing like remembering a word in another language. We didn't hug. We didn't even step closer. She said, "How are your boys?" And I said, "Hungry. Growing," and she laughed like a windshield wiper clearing 2 seconds of rain. She said, "I won't reach out again," and I said, "I know," and then she touched the side of her sweater where a person might one day be and said, "I'll be okay," with a fierceness I respected and maybe hated and maybe envied. When I got to my car, there was a text from him, a photo of a tiny plastic cup with an orange lid, blurry on the passenger seat, and the caption, "Round 2. It's a whole romance, this cup." I wrote back, "Return your prop on time," and the dot bubble sat there like a held breath and then went away. His mother took the boys to the botanical gardens on Sunday. I stood in my kitchen alone and took the toothbrush that had been his from the holder and put it in a bag under the sink because I couldn't stand to look at it and I couldn't stand to throw it away. I sorted the mail and there was a white envelope with the health insurance logo and the phrase "explanation of benefits" in a font designed to make you feel calm. Inside was a line item, for a procedure, a code and a sum and words like outpatient and customary. I stood with my back against the dishwasher and thought about how you can itemize a cut but not a stitch. At the next therapy session, our teenager asked if he could bring the dog from across the street. He said, "I focus better if there's something soft to keep alive in the room." The therapist said yes and the dog put its head on my knee and exhaled like a bad day getting up off the couch. Our younger announced, "I want 2 Christmases, and then, but 1 tree," as though we might get literal and he wanted to head us off. His dad said, "I can bring the tree down the block. We can say it's visiting," and he looked at me and I nodded and it was stupid and perfect and the first time we both smiled at the same moment in weeks. On Tuesday, the lab called him with the word cleared. He forwarded the email to me without a subject line, just the little paperclip like a flag. I read it 3 times the way you read a weather report that says the hurricane made a different choice. That night, he came over with a bag of groceries for taco night because Tuesday is still Tuesday. He set cilantro on the counter and said, "I'm taking off my ring," without dramatics, just like you say, "Turn left at the light," and I watched him slide it from his finger and thread it on a shoelace he pulled out of his hoodie and tie a knot like a sailor. He hung it on the nail by the back door that has always held the dog leash we never owned. It clicked against the paint and stayed there, small and undeniable and weirdly polite. Before bed, I took the lilies off his refrigerator because the pollen had dusted everything with proof. I plucked the stamens and washed my hands twice and still the orange clung like a story. I put the flowers in the trash with the junk mail and a cereal box and a sense of ceremony, so quiet it didn't know its own name. When I got home, the house smelled like dish soap and pencil shavings and the smallest bit like smoke if you leaned close and used your imagination. I sat at the table with a ziploc of cards and a calendar and a pen that writes too loudly and wrote the word mediation on a day in June. The line looked like a road if you squinted. Somewhere, the woman I met without really meeting is counting weeks on the inside of her wrist. Somewhere else, my husband not mine, not the way that word used to mean folds the ugly blanket over his knees and looks at the print of the boys on his windowsill and memorizes their faces like a prayer. In our living room, our teenager pretends to study with headphones on and no music playing, and our younger sleeps with his backpack at the foot of the bed like a promise you can pack. On the porch, the space where the lilies were looks like a mouth that has finished speaking. And in the freezer, that family-sized bag of blueberries glows under the light like a ridiculous, ordinary moon. Update 6. Mediation was in a conference room that smelled like lemons that forgot how to be cheerful. There was a bowl of butterscotch candies no one touched and a box of tissues with a pattern that tried for neutral and landed on hospital. The mediator had a pilot's comm and 3 pens arranged by height. She asked us to say our names, out loud like we might have forgotten how to introduce ourselves to each other. He wore his ring on the shoelace again, not neat as a prayer. I said we needed a calendar that didn't feel like a hostage note. He said he wanted the boys' Thursdays to stop feeling like a math problem. The mediator nodded the way you nod at people carrying something heavy, and then she started making words into columns as if columns could hold. His phone buzzed twice and he flipped it face down like a person stacking a chair that wobbles. We took a break because the mediator said hydration makes better sentences. In the hallway he opened his email and I saw the subject line because it was all caps and kindness, organizational changes. His mouth did the shape people do when they hit a door they thought would slide. He turned the screen to me, not for comfort, just for proof. Your role has been eliminated was sandwiched between words like appreciate and transition that made it sound like a choice. Okay, he said to no one, and then again, softer, like practicing. We went back in. The mediator slid the tissues toward him without looking like she was sliding anything and said, "We can't pause." He shook his head. "We'll finish what we started," he said, and I flashed on our teenager saying the same string of syllables like a spell and felt something in my reb stand up straighter than it wanted to. We redrew numbers on a dry erase board that became a weather map. Unemployment. Cobra. Temporary support that looked like a bridge made from 2x4s and hope. We picked exchange days and who holds which holidays and when the tree visits which block. We wrote mediation on my June square like it was both the name of a person we were meeting and a place we were trying to find with no map app willing to help. He signed his name like he was signing for a package he hadn't ordered. In the elevator down, the doors opened on the wrong floor because a woman in a navy blazer pressed the wrong button. The plaque by the door said reproductive law in gold letters that reflected back too bright. She stepped out with a folder hugged to her body the way you hold warmth to your sternum. It took a fraction for me to realize it was Sarah, smaller than elegance makes people look when they are in lavas. Her hair was up like she had plans for efficiency. We both took a breath in that elevator air that always smells like old dust and somebody's cologne from last week. She didn't say my name. I didn't say hers. When she shifted the folder, a black and white print slipped and for a second I saw 2 moons on grainy water. Circles inside a rectangle. She tucked it back with hands like she was afraid to tear paper. Her eyes met mine and did the quickest nod that contained both apology and weather report. The doors closed, like a curtain. He was standing behind me holding the butterscotch he didn't realize he'd pocketed. "Wrong floor," he said to the air, and I didn't answer because the words in my throat were all verbs with nowhere to go. We told the boys about the job on the porch because the light is kinda there. Our teenager said, "So no travel team, it's fine, I'm not a tragedy," with that teenage precision that is both armor and exactness. Our younger asked if being poor meant we had to give away the cat we don't have. I said, "It means we count more things," and his shoulders dropped like counting is a language he understands. He asked if the house would have to go somewhere else. "Not now," I told him, "and we're trying bird nesting for the summer," like I was explaining a science project where parents are the variables and the constant is a roof. Bird nesting started on a Tuesday because everything big in our house starts on a Tuesday. He moved his life into a gray tote that said week 1 on painter's take, and I moved mine into the trunk of my car like a college student who forgot she grew up. He brings the ugly blanket back and forth over his arm like a pageant sash for people who can't fix anything but can keep knees warm. We left the ring on the nail, by the back door and hung a second nail, beneath it for the key to the sublet that isn't his anymore. Hello, sunshine migrated to our fridge like a truce. That first nest night, lightning stitched itself across the sky and then the power gave up for a while. He was at the house. I was in the sublet with a lamp that only pretends to be bright. The boys called and I could hear the dark in their voices. I drove over on instinct that doesn't ask for schedules. Inside, we found headlamps and put them on our foreheads and looked like a family of amateurs about to explore a cave. He told a ghost story so bad it made its own light. Our younger ate a handful of frozen blueberries like tiny cold planets and laughed purple. Our teenager said, "I can't believe this is helping," and then it did. When the power clicked back, all three of them squinted like daybreak had been hiding inside our own house. His mother pressed an envelope into my hand on the sidewalk the next afternoon. "It's not a string," she said, eyes on the maple tree where a squirrel was auditioning for mischief. It was money I could feel through paper. I folded it and put it in the drawer that has the screwdriver and the birthday candles and the tape measure, the one that holds the things you need when something is almost right but not yet. I stood at the dining table and listed the things we could sell and the things that felt like cutting hair too close to the scalp. I posted the trampoline that gave our teenager a scar and watched a stranger's kid bounce once, twice, like punctuation on a chapter I wasn't ready to finish. He carried the frame to their truck and I carried the screws in a Ziploc that used to hold crayons. The lab emailed him cleared, part 2, a second weather map that said the storm had made an ethical turn and was heading somewhere else. He forwarded it again with no subject line, just a little paperclip, and I opened it at a red light and felt a thing in my chest I hadn't felt in months that wasn't hope exactly but was the kind of quiet you get after a good cry in a car by yourself. On Friday I took the boys for haircuts because back to school nights happen even in families that are new shapes. The barbershop had a sign that said walk-ins welcome like a value statement. While our younger made faces at himself in the mirror and our teenager practiced looking like a person who does not spend time in mirrors, my phone buzzed with a number with no name. It was a lawyer I didn't know with a voice you could trust to read instructions on a parachute. She said she represented Sarah for the limited purpose of documenting boundaries. She said words like waiver and non-paternity and had a syntax that felt like scaffolding. She asked me to confirm my address for a simple notice so that none of this reached us by surprise. I said the address. I didn't ask the due date. She said, very gently, twins do better when people keep their lanes, and before I could place my own breath she thanked me for my time and the call ended. The boys spun in their chairs and made the cape Stewie, the fluttering thing capes do when you're 12 or 15 and pretending not to be. Sunday morning I was at the co-op again, because apparently I only buy food from places with chalkboards. The cashier wrapped my bread like it needed a winter coat. On my way out, the automatic doors opened late like drama. Sarah was coming in with a canvas bag that said local in a font that tried to be friendly. She looked like a person holding 2 cups of ginger tea but I saw there was only one. I don't know if she saw me first or if I saw her and pretended I didn't. Our bodies choreograph an avoidance like we'd practiced. At the fruit display she put 2 hands on the bin of limes and breathed like the room had forgotten to. When she looked up, the smallest smile happened and died. There was no conversation. There was a nod that meant all the words you don't say because they scrape on the way out. She shifted her canvas bag and for one beat the top flopped in there, tucked where cereal would go, were 2 stills that might have been moons or might have been anything if I'd chosen differently. She passed by me with a lemon clean smell of the store and something softer I remembered from champagne months, and then she was a person walking toward crackers. We did the first handoff in the rain at his mother's because a porch with a railing is easier when everyone's hands are too full. Our teenager slung his backpack like someone who's trained for this. Our younger made us all bend down to tie our laces at the same time because he'd read somewhere that synchronized things make you feel like a team. We tied knots that held. He waved and said, "See you Thursday." No goalpost moving, and our teenager rolled his eyes but it was a fond roll that smelled almost like relief. He got in his dad's car without looking back and then did look back and grinned because the dog from across the street had his paws up on the window wanting to be included in every custody arrangement ever made. The car door shut with a noise I'm still not used to. That night the house was me and the hum of the fridge and the tinny sound of rain in the gutters that need clearing. The lilies are gone. The blueberries are gone, too, finally turned into smoothies and a punchline that did its best. On the kitchen table, next to the Ziploc of cards and a pen that insists on scratching loudly, the mediator's printout sat face up with names and blocks of time like an architect tried to draw a bridge out of pixels. I traced the line between Tuesday and Friday with my fingertip like a person figuring out how to walk from one island to the next on stepping stones that wobble but, miracle, still hold. Somewhere across town a woman is adding up milligrams of folate and trying to sleep with 2 heartbeats practicing inside her. Somewhere 3 blocks over, a man with a shoelace on a nail and a photo on a sill is learning how to make rice without looking it up. In our hallway, our teenager taped a new poem to the inside of his closet where only he can see it. I caught one line when the door swung, sometimes the bruise learns how to be a consolation. Our younger fell asleep on the couch mid-cartoon and I carried him to bed with my chin on his hair because some habits are the only God I believe in. The porch smells like rain and old flowers and the space where a thing used to be. The house feels like it's exhaling without anyone telling it how.